everybody. Tracy here with a race recap from the Texas Time Trials 24-hour solo race, which was also the 24-hour U.S. National Time Trial for 2020. I'm exhausted. This is going to be long and rambling, forewarning. So if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, I don't blame you. I'm sorry. I'm exhausted and I ramble. But the race went so well. But before I start with my race recap, I wanted to give a huge shout out to all the other ladies out there. Ultra racing, if you haven't ever done ultra racing, whether you're a lady or a guy, but I'm speaking specifically to the ladies right now, I would highly recommend looking into it. You can go to the website ultracycling.com, which the World Ultra Cycling Association runs. They have a bunch of information, but they also have like lists of races all over the world. Especially right now with the Rona, it's they're one of the only disciplines that are actually having races right now, but it's so empowering because the ultra cycling community is so massively supportive. It's completely polar opposite from what you see in road racing, which, don't get me wrong, I love road racing. And the women in road racing are supportive of each other, but when you line up on race day in a super competitive race field, you've got a lot of game facing going on and whatnot, and then everybody hugs it out after the race. But with ultra cycling, you're not only competing against the other people that are out there, but you're also competing against yourself, and you're pushing your own limits, and you're challenging yourself, and you're working to beat prior distances and numbers and stuff like that. And I found it to be so very fulfilling, because you can't control what anybody else does on race day in any discipline. You can only control your own racing, right? Like, you can control your own numbers, you can control the preparation that you put into it, but there's always going to be somebody out there that's stronger and better. And maybe, I don't know, I guess it depends on who you are. But with ultra racing, even if you don't win the race, when I go into an ultra race, I set goals for myself, and I'm like, okay, I want to hold this power for this amount of time, and I want to average out to about this speed, and I want to, I just set all these little mini goals. I want to hit this many miles if it's like a timed race, or if it's a distance race, I want to do it in under X number of hours, or I want to beat last year's performance, like just incremental progress. I want to improve upon my own performances in the past. And so even at the end of the race, if I didn't win the race, I still feel like I won if I've succeeded, I guess, if I meet all of these other goals, because I've improved. My training has paid off. I did what I was, what I've trained for, and somebody else was just better that day, and that's fine. But anyway, so that's my little spiel on ultra racing. If anybody has any questions, feel free to message me about it, or like I said, go to the ultracycling.com website. And also Holland Racing puts on a lot. So if you're in Texas, follow Holland Racing on the different socials. They put on a lot of really good socially distanced ultra racing events, and they've got it nailed down. So, okay, now on to really quick, also about yesterday. I want to give a shout out to all my friends out there, and new friends. So I met Jenna, I think Rodriguez, I could have her last name wrong, but Jenna was also racing the 24-hour. Super cool human being, super nice person, and she rocked it. And then some of my friends, Kelly Nelson, went out there and destroyed the 12-hour. Jana Retrova went out and did the 6-hour, and she set, I think, a course record overall and won the overall men's and women's race, which is just amazing. Girl power. Dawn, my friend from way back when in Corpus, and Gemma Hollis went out there as Team Fish and Chips and absolutely destroyed the 6-hour team relay. I know I'm going to forget people. And Allison Carey and new friend Valerie, they both lined up for the 500 mile and competed it. And Valerie actually beat my time from last year. Like, she destroyed it. And Allison had a really, really good race too. So it's good to see them out there. And of course my guy friends, love to you guys too. I got to see Walter and Andrew and Joe, and I'm gonna forget somebody, so I'm gonna stop listing names now, but I told you I was gonna ramble. Sorry, not sorry. Anyway, so now as my race, Oh, I'm switching hands because my arm is tired. There we go. Holding my phone is hard, guys. So like I said, if you watched my pre-race video, I did a lot of planning in advance. I set up my spreadsheets and I had goals of what I wanted to accomplish, irregardless of where that placed me. If I met these particular targets, I was going to be happy with my performance on the day. My targets were, I wanted to hold specific power numbers throughout, and I did. I also, a long shot target. So let me preface this by saying Sarah Cooper is an absolute legend in the ultra racing community. Not only is she a legend, she's a friend and somebody that I look up to immensely as just being a general good person, nice person, but a beast out there, and somebody that I always dread racing, in a good way, dread racing against, because I know she's going to rip my legs off and make me work. Anyway, she held the course record, and so one of my targets was, if everything went right, I wanted to take a shot at taking that course record down, and it was the overall men's and women's course record. So that was one of them, and I did accomplish that. So I was super, super happy with that. So how did my race play out? So it was 24 hours, and my goal was to complete 17 laps. And I had mapped out what I wanted my power to be. And my fueling, I think I talked about this in my pre-race video. I had changed my fueling up completely. I was going basically full liquid with CarboRocket Half Evil, 1 bottle per lap, which had 333 calories and 80 grams of carbs. And then also Nuun Hydration every lap. So I was staying on top of, CarboRocket does have electrolytes and glutamine and BCAAs and all that good stuff in it, but Nuun has extra electrolytes, and that's what my body is used to because I'm a Nuun athlete and I love their products. So using both of those in combination worked out better than I could have possibly imagined. I was super skeptical coming into the race because I'd only used the Half Evil from CarboRocket for up to about a 6 or 7 hour effort. I never, like, extrapolating that out to 24 hours is dangerous because a lot can change. I have never felt so fantastic from a fueling standpoint from start to finish ever in my life, ever in a long distance event. I'm totally sold. I am gonna go home and order a bunch more, and I'm not sponsored by them. This is just a totally unbiased, completely honest review. So I had 2 flavors. I had lemonade and black cherry. The lemonade was caffeinated and the black cherry was not. And my instructions to Jamie were to alternate so that I didn't over caffeinate, because if you over caffeinate, that can cause you to have to pee really badly, and I didn't want that problem. So we alternated back and forth. I had plenty of energy. I never ever felt like my glutamine stores were getting low or my carbs were running low or out of fuel. My carb preload, by the way, worked really well. I'm rambling so much. This is gonna be a long video. Sorry. So anyway, when the race started out, my target, according to my spreadsheet, was to hold 175 watts normalized power for the first 4 laps on my time trial bike, my Cervelo P3. One of the little mistakes that was made before the race, normally I would race this race on a semi-compact front crankset and a 30 or 32 tooth cassette in the back because it's so hilly. And towards the end of the race, 24 hours, you have nothing left in your legs, so you need those extra teeth. Anyway, we got to the race and realized that we had a 28 cassette on my disc. Oopsie. So I knew that was going to be tough later in the race, but I also had my Factor that I was alternating with, and the Factor has gravel gearing, so I knew that if it just got to be too much, I could resort to the Factor for the rest of the laps instead of just keeping and swapping back and forth. So anyway, backtracking, my target was 175 watts of normalized power for the first 4 laps. I started out fairly hot, and looked down and realized I was averaging about 195 normalized power. I had the normalized power on my on my Wahoo. And one of the reasons for that is because this course is so hilly and I tend to coast the descents in order to conserve energy. I knew just a straight power reading wouldn't give an accurate reflection of the effort that I was putting out. So anyway, 195 watts, I looked down, I'm like averaging 195 the first lap, halfway through, and I'm like, well, I don't feel like I'm averaging 195 watts. So then I start doubting myself in my head. I'm like, I wonder if my power meter is maybe running high, because this feels like 175, but it's reading 195, and I feel fantastic, and I don't want to back it down if my power reading's running high. So what do I do? So I debated with myself for a little bit, and then just decided to go with it. I realized also I had just coming back from like a 7-week block of altitude training in Colorado. So that like hit my head too, and I'm like, I didn't really factor that in, so maybe that's kicking in and I'm just feeling really strong. So I went ahead and rolled with it, and I averaged about 193, I think, normalized power for very consistently for the first 4 laps on Wicked, which is my P3 Cervelo P3 time trial bike. Came in my first century, I think that was like 105 miles. My first century was done in like 4 hours and 50 minutes. I was feeling great. I came into the pit singing, I feel good. Anyway, we swapped out at the end of that. I told Jamie to text my coach to let him know I was running hot. I was running high on my power, but I was feeling really good. And my coach gave me the thumbs up. I could get text communication throughout the race. So, switched to the Factor. The Factor, by the way, was amazing. So that bike is so light and nimble and responsive, and it flew up the hills after lugging my P3, which is a tank, but super aero and fast. After lugging that thing up the hills for 4 laps with a 28 cassette, I jumped on my Factor and just was like, I had new legs again. It was amazing. So I think I raced the next 5 laps on the Factor. I kept a consistent lap time, it slowed down after that first 4 laps. I dropped my power intentionally. So the plan was after the first 4 laps to drop it from 175 to 165. But I dropped it off to about 180 after that first 4 laps because I was still feeling great. And although the power meter was a completely different power meter, I found that the power was still reading higher than what I felt. So I definitely think it was an altitude gain for sure. So even though I was holding 180 normalized power, it felt like what my body would typically feel like at about 160. So I just went with it. So honestly, I don't have a lot to say about the first half of the race. I was in the lead from the second lap on. It was really funny. I'm not even sure who it was. I'll have to look at the start list. But on the first lap, a guy came ripping around me after we were out of draft. It was probably halfway through the first lap, ripping by me and like, attacking. But, and this is something, if you do ultra racing, you'll know, like you can't race another person's race. You have to stick to your numbers no matter what anybody else is doing, because anything can happen in the end. And as he went ripping by me, he seemed to be working quite hard to get around me. And so I made a mental note of that. And I'm like, we'll see what happens. And then the other thing that I noticed is I had him actually in sight for the rest of the first lap. And like every 2 or 3 minutes, he would look back over his shoulder and see where I was. And that's another, at least in my mind, that's kind of a no-no with ultra racing. You can't be looking behind you ever. You can't be worrying about what's happening behind you. You have to stick to your numbers. You have to keep it super steady and just go with it. And so I felt fairly confident observing that I would overtake him a little bit later. Now, do keep in mind, my goal going into this race was never to win the overall. Andrew Willis, who is 1, my good friend, and 2, my absolute ultra racing mentor, idol, everything. Like every time I have a question, I ask Willis. Like I call Willis a lot with ultra racing questions. He is my source of information. He is a beast of an athlete. And so he was racing as well. And so we kind of like had a friendly camaraderie, like competition thing going on. But I knew like I was never, ever planning to even be ahead of him, but much less like, in a place to be able to win the outright at all. So anyway, halfway through the race, it's like 3 a.m., middle of the night. I started to feel fatigued, and I don't even remember what lap it was. I think it was around lap 8 or 9. It was coming into the end of the lap. I think it was 6 o'clock in the morning, and the sun came up about 6:40. So in my head, I'm telling myself, like, I have to just make it till the sun comes up, because in ultra racing, when you race overnight, you always hit this little mini wall, or at least I do, in the middle of the night when it's super dark. You're starting to feel more fatigued, you're starting to feel tired, the lack of sun is getting to you, and so I knew once the sun came up I would feel re-energized and I'd be fine. And I was like, I just have to make it till the sun comes up. But I had to pee, and so like 6 o'clock, I roll through at the end of that lap, and I go into the porta potty to pee, and literally fell apart. Like nothing was functioning properly. I'm trying to unzip my skin suit. My hands aren't working. I'm trying to like hold the light because there's no light in the porta potty. I'm holding the light. I'm holding the vest. I'm trying to get out of my skin suit. I'm just a hot mess, and it took me several minutes just to get out of it. And I do my thing, and I pee, and I go to put my skin suit back on, and I can't. Like, I can't, my hands are not functioning, and I'm like crying. I'm crying hysterically in the porta potty at 6 o'clock in the morning, like falling apart. And my husband, Jamie, knocks on the door, and he's like, honey, and he's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't have enough hands. Like I've ever had 3 or 4 hands in my life, but anyway, so he like opens the porta potty door. I unlocked it for him. He helped me get back into my skin suit, and then like I sat down for about 2 minutes and reset. Like I knew you can't let yourself get hysterical when you're racing a situation. You have to stay calm. Staying calm no matter what's going on is the key, one of the biggest keys to successfully completing an ultra race. So sat down for about 2 minutes, completely reset. Had Lee McDaniels was there taking photos. Thank you again, Lee, so much for coming out. And so I'm like falling apart, and I've got Lee taking pictures. It was amazing. And then Andrew's support crew actually was working with Jamie. They were both kind of helping both of us. So Tice and Kenny Hill were like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine, guys. Anyway, Kenny gave me some pineapple, which is the only solid food I ate the entire race, was 2 chunks of pineapple to help me stop crying. And that did the trick. So I reset, got back on my bike, and got back to it. I was fortunately able to successfully return to my calm, ultra racing mindset, block everything else out, and just focus on the numbers. So now I'm going to fast forward. So that was kind of to say, like, I'm sharing that because to anybody that ultra races or is considering it, expect some low points. They happen to everybody. You're gonna have them. There's nothing, at least that I figured out, to avoid them. And the trick is you have to recenter yourself and kind of come back to normal and then get back out there. So anyway, so I got back out there, and Jamie was texting me gaps at this point on Willis, because Willis was sitting in second overall, and I still, like, in the back, I knew, like, there's no chance. So Willis, anyway, I'm not going to give away his secrets, but he does very, very well at pacing himself. And so I knew he was going to be a force towards the end of the race, especially considering how hot I went out. So Jamie's texting me gaps, and I had like 20 minutes coming into the meltdown, and then I had like 5 minutes coming out of it. But I couldn't, like I said, you can't be worried about what anybody else is doing when you're racing. So I just held my numbers. And the sun came up, and I felt fantastic again, and everything's going great. So then, I don't even know when it was. So the race went till 5 p.m. So I'm guessing it was probably around maybe 9 or 10 a.m. I switched back to my time trial bike, and then it started throwing gears. Chains. It started throwing chains. So it worked great the first several laps, but then when I went back to it, every few times that I would shift from the small to the big ring, it would throw to the chain to the outside, like hanging off the pedal. And so then I would shift to my small ring to throw it back on. And most of the time that worked. Like that would re-ring it, and then I could continue. But probably on that lap, I would say 4 times, when I would shift to the small ring, it would jump too far, and then it would get wedged in between the chain ring and the frame. So that means stopping, because your pedal stops turning, and if you pedal, you're just going to wedge it in there more. So I had to stop, get off the bike, pry it. I'm doing motions you can't see, like pry the heck out of it, get it out of there, reset it, stay calm, and get going again. So that happened, and so after a couple laps of that, I stopped. I switched bikes. I caught Shane Trauber out on course because he was riding neutral support, and yelled at him. I'm like, tell Jamie, because my phone wasn't working, tell Jamie I want the Factor the next lap. So I rolled in. Jamie had the Factor ready to go. I jumped on it, hardly skipped a beat, back off again. And again, every time that I got on the Factor from the P3, it felt so comfortable because the P3 is great, but I do have a fairly aggressive position on it. So, and it's so heavy. So every time that I switched back to the factory, it was like a huge weight was lifted because the bike's light and I'm in a less aggressive position. So my traps get a little bit of a break and just, it was great. So I get back on the Factor, ViSTA, and I do a few more laps, and I stuck with my plan from that point on. Like numbers, I was pretty much sticking to my numbers that I had previously planned from, I don't know, probably 10 a.m. on through, or 9 a.m. on through the rest of the race. So I'm going to fast forward now because the rest of the race was pretty much uneventful. Well, up until this point. So Jamie's texting me gaps, and Willis is, from the time I had my meltdown, anywhere from 5 to 9 minutes. I never built that gap back out like I had it originally. So he was ranging from 5 to 9 minutes behind me, kind of playing a little cat and mouse. I knew he was stalking me. I knew he had somebody texting him gaps too, and he was just waiting to pounce because he was waiting for me because he saw me go out hot. And I'm like, he's sitting back there waiting for me to fall apart, and he is going to just eat me alive. And so I've got this in the back of my head. But again, you can't let that stuff get to you. You have to stay in control. So I just kept holding my numbers, had faith in my numbers, and got to the end of lap 15. So now I know I have 2 laps to go, and I have 3 hours to complete them in. And my lap times were ranging anywhere from, after the first set of 4 laps, it was like 1:18, which is insane. But for the rest of the race, they were ranging from like 1:22 to 1:25. So I knew completing 2 laps in 3 hours would be no problem. But I knew Willis was chasing me down. So with 2 laps to go, I kicked it back up a little bit. So I didn't go all in, but I did pick my pace up. And my goal was to discourage Willis from chasing, because I was like, if I can put, with 2 laps to go, if I can put another couple of minutes into him before this final lap, then he's going to cross the line and be like, well, there's no point chasing her down because she's building time on me and I'm not going to be able to do it, right? So I'm like, all right. So I picked it up a little and buried myself a bit on that 16th lap. And I crossed knowing that I had taken the course record, and that I had also won. At that point, I knew I had won the women's 24-hour time trial championship. So at that point, my official goals were complete. But now I'm like, well, I'm only 1 lap away from the overall win, and I got to try to stick it to Willis and see, you know, how fun is that? Like racing one of your friends out there that you know is just a beast. It is amazing. But so anyway, I crossed the line on the 16th lap. Jamie gave me a hand up, so I didn't stop rolling. I just, grab a quick, cross hand up, fly through, and I've got my coach texting me, and he's texting me, go, dig, bury yourself, leave it all out there, like stuff like this. And so I go into that last lap and just lit the afterburners. And I don't know how my body did this, but I'm not going to give numbers away. But let's just say I put out some really killer numbers on in hour 23 of a 24-hour race that I don't know how they existed, other than caffeine and adrenaline and being hunted, I think. So I have Willis to thank for that, because if it weren't for him nipping at my heels, I would never in a million years have known that I'm capable of what I am apparently capable of at the end of a race. So turns out he was only 30 seconds behind me going into that last lap. 30 seconds. He had closed down like 3 minutes on me and was 30 seconds behind me. I didn't know this at the time, but I'm just going, I'm going all, I'm leaving it all out there. And I apologize to anybody that I passed on that last lap, because I was literally grunting and crying as I was destroying you could hear me ripping myself to shreds. I was like the whole time. It was the only way for me to release the pain that I was experiencing and keep going. Anyway, so I do this. Long story short, I won. I sprinted across. I didn't even post up for Lee at the finish. I'm so bummed. But I didn't know how far back Willis was. And I was like, he has totally been stalking me this whole race, and he's going to come ripping around me like in a sprint finish at mile 450, an hour 24 or whatever. So I finished my 17th lap. I don't remember the official time. I think it was like 23 hours and 30 or 40, 23 hours and 40-ish minutes. I won the overall. Willis finished second, and apparently, and I, again, talking to him after the fact, I had gone so hard into that last lap that he really wasn't able to chase me down, which it blows my mind. You guys, Willis, and anybody that knows him, he is an amazing athlete, and I'm still like shocked and on the floor. And Sarah Cooper too. Like, so one of the things to me, I'm not gonna cry, guys. To have two friends that are so ridiculously strong and push me to the levels that they push me is such a great position to be in. And it's just, I came out on top today, probably for like the only time that I will ever come out on top in that same situation with those two. But I got that one, so like 10 years from now, I'll be like, hey, Willis, remember that one time? And he will have like annihilated me 30 other times, but whatever. So anyway, I have to give a couple shout outs. BiSaddle, dude, I have BiSaddles on all of my bikes, and I've never been so comfortable down there. I didn't wear my underwear today, which was a good thing. I didn't have any issues with saddle pain over the entire 24 hours on either the Factor or the P3, which is great, amazing. I'm seriously going to have to look into getting, I can't swing it right now, but I don't know if you guys have seen the Factor, the Slick, their TT bike. I'm going to have to look into that, because as much as I love that ViSTA, imagine if I had an actual Factor time trial bike. Anyway, one day when I'm a millionaire, they're amazing. Anyway, so the shout outs, the BiSaddle, those guys are in Utah, and they are family. Like, they're amazing, and they make an amazing product. So if you're having issues with saddle pain in any discipline, give them a shot. They've got a trial. They're awesome. Obviously, and I've already alluded to this, not a sponsor, but CarboRocket, dude, if you're an ultra racer or race distances, like any kind of long gravel or anything where you need a consistent fuel source, and you're tired of goos and gels and stuff, because that's what I usually use, give it a shot. We've never had such an easy time with fueling during an ultra race before, ever. Nuun Hydration kept me super hydrated, on top of my electrolytes. I did not have a single cramp, not one cramp, and still haven't to this moment after emptying myself out there. So let's see. Oh my gosh. Obviously Panaracer for all their support, and did my openers in the Hondo last week, so that prepped me and lit the fire for me for this race. The Factor bike, just Factor ViSTA, amazing. So many people that I have, Andrew, Willis, and Sarah Cooper for pushing me. Oh, Jamie, obviously, amazing crew chief, nailed it, freaking nailed it. Could not have been any more perfect. He was just right there when I needed him. Kenny Hill and Tice Porterfield, for the help with the support. They were great. And that Pineapple Kenny, lifesaver, thank you. Sarah, all the friends. Oh my God. Like I said, this community is amazing. And so all the friends that texted me or messaged me, you guys are amazing. And finally, Zwift, believe it or not. So as everybody that follows me knows, I've been doing a lot of Zwift racing lately, and who would think that like an hour-long Zwift race would prep you for an ultra race, right? I came into this so undertrained from a distance perspective, but intentionally. And like last year's, I was so much more prepared for the distance as far as training wise, like logging just massive miles. I haven't done that this year. My longest ride in ages was the Hondo last weekend, which was like 7.5 hours of gravel. I've been Zwift racing and doing intervals and some longer, like 4-hour stuff on the weekends. But the thing that I've learned from Zwift racing, and I've already knew, is how to suffer, like how to suck it up and keep giving it. I think that last lap was totally a product of Zwift racing, because I've learned through all the Pro-Am races and stuff and these really super competitive races, how when you think that you've just burned your last match, you've got to dig and find one more. And it's so mental. It's so mental. Oh my God, my coach, Matt Seagrave, you guys, don't stop learning on Instagram. Amazing coach, prepped me to the T. Like I have never, like I said, I felt so fantastic. Granted, okay, I didn't feel fantastic the whole time. That would be a total lie. But having done these types of races before, I still can't believe how great I felt at the end. I mean, I felt like a pile of doo-doo, but less like a pile of doo-doo than in previous years. So yeah, and all of the volunteers, guys, I'm just gonna stop rambling now. Mom, Dad, everybody, I'm signing out now. I think that I don't even know how long this video is. It's probably close to, it is 30 minutes long. So there's my 30-minute race report. I know I'm forgetting somebody and something. I'm so sorry, but thank you, everybody. I'm gonna go sleep for well, at least until I've got to work tomorrow morning. I'm running on no sleep. So have a great Sunday, everybody.